back, Professor Strohschneider. Good morning. Glad to see all of you here in this room. C'est la rentrée. In other words, it is also the time where the farmers have their harvesting season, and we today want to stay in the picture, perhaps harvest the results of the strategic dialogue on the future of agriculture in the European Union. There's hardly a sector more important to our continent than agriculture. It is, as we all know, vital to our health. It is strategic to our economy and our self-sufficiency. But we know that our farmers are confronted with many and mounting challenges, either the very tough global competition, but also the devastating effects of climate change. As we know, Europe is the fastest warming continent, and we know and experience all the extreme weather events that are becoming increasingly frequent, whether it's heat waves and droughts, or floods, hailstorms, stark rain. But we also observe an increasing amount of depleted and polluted soil, and these soils are less fertile and less flood resistant, and they are diminished in their ability to hold both water but also carbon. We know that in some parts of Europe, water availability is already a severe problem. Now, the farming community is among the first victims of these crises. But at the same time, the sector holds many solutions to mitigate or sometimes even reverse the effects. And we're not starting from scratch. As you know, we have done an important progress towards more sustainability. That has been done by all the sectors and actors in the sector. But we all know that more ambitious steps have to be taken. And therefore, I'm very happy that the strategic dialogue on the future of agriculture in the European Union is presenting consensual, that's important, solutions. You will certainly speak a lot about the way forward, but we all know already today that we must do more and we will do more to protect our farmers and to make the agri-food system more resilient, more competitive, but most importantly, also more sustainable. So, dear Professor Strohschneider, let me thank you for your great work. As chairman of the strategic dialogue, I'm very grateful for the work of the group as a whole. It brought together many different stakeholders from the sector. You had big producers and small farmers, young farmers. You had scientists and environmental groups, financial organizations, but also consumer organizations and many others around the table. They all represent the extraordinary diversity of the agri-food sector, and of course they also represent the complexity of the agri-food value chain. Now, I had the pleasure to see that group at work on three different occasions during plenary sessions. And for me, it was very interesting to see the way they worked, the way they grew together, and the dynamics that evolved within this group. And over the process, how committed they all were as a group to finding common solutions. And I think this in itself is already a big success, because it shows that with the right structures in place, it is possible to move beyond a polarized debate and to create trust, the much needed trust. So this is a very positive lesson to draw from your mandate, but of course the content is as important. Perhaps to finalize, what's next? My team and I will, of course, study carefully the recommendation in the report. These recommendations then will feed into the vision for agriculture and food, and I will present this vision, or we call it roadmap, within the first 100 days of the next mandate. There are already some key objectives outlined in my political guidelines. The first is we need to ensure fair and sufficient income to our farmers, because thanks to the European farmers, Europe has the best quality food in the world. So they must get the livelihood they deserve. Yes, we have the European Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP, that already provides 300 billion euros, and this till 2027. In parallel, we must have a good look at the agri-food value chain, because we see that too often farmers are the weakest link in this value chain. Some are forced to systematically sell their products below production costs, and that cannot be. Therefore, in March of this year, the Commission put forward recommendations to improve farmers' negotiating power, and I think we should together continue building on a fairer system. The second point, very important, we must support an agriculture that works for nature and with nature. And we know that this can only be done with an efficient system of rewards and incentives. As I said, farmers are among the first to fundamentally feel the effects of climate and environmental changes and crises. At the time, unsustainable agriculture and structures that are unsustainable and practices themselves do contribute and fuel the climate crisis. But on the other hand, the agriculture sector holds many solutions to mitigate and to adapt to climate crisis. So sustainable agriculture is therefore an extremely important instrument. You've been working a lot on it. And services for a healthy nature have to be rewarded. Because only if farmers can live off their land will they invest in more sustainable practices, and only if we achieve our climate and environmental goals together will farmers be able to continue making a living. So we share the same goal, protecting nature, but also creating sustainable prosperity for our farmers. And finally, we must continue to cut red tape, especially for small and family farms. Earlier this year, we introduced measures to free them from controls and penalties linked to the CAP. So we want to continue down this path together with our member states. And we must promote a competitive European food value chain. For this, we must seize all the opportunities offered by the abundance of innovation in this field. You know them, from precision farming to drones to new breeding techniques, and not only on the large-scale farms, but also in cooperatives and in the many SMEs of the sector. For all the areas I have mentioned, dear Professor Strohschneider, you will now present the concrete recommendations of the group. I just want to mention one that really caught my attention. It's that we should keep the spirit and the energy of the strategic dialogue while going forward. And I very much like this idea, to have kind of a board accompanying the transition and making sure at every step that this consensual spirit stays alive. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Good morning, everybody. This strategic dialogue has been launched by the President in January this year and has been really a tough and adventurous journey over the 7 months, I must say, rich of fascinating experiences and lessons learned for all of us. Tough in this context means 7 plenary sessions in 7 months, almost 100 meetings of working groups, task force sessions, and so forth, uncounted phone calls, mails, and finally, a plenary session which took over 38 hours in 2.5 days last week. 38 hours last week, followed by the unanimous adoption of the final report by all the members. From Copa Cogeca to Greenpeace, from Food Drink Europe to consumer protection, from slow food via IFOAM and SEJA to the European Investment Bank. And if I emphasize only these few here, this is not to disregard all the important others, but merely to indicate the range of worldviews, political positions, and economic interests within the strategic dialogue. Without the unwavering commitment of all members, of their expertise and consensus orientation, the achievement of the strategic dialogue really would not have been possible. I want at this point to express my deep gratitude to all of them. Nor would this achievement have been possible without the truly self-denying, all-day, all-night commitment of our fantastic support team, for which I'm particularly and personally grateful. And I would like to extend my thanks to you, Madam President, and to your team in the Commission for the trust you have placed in us and in me personally, for your encouragements over time, and for preserving the independence of the strategic dialogue. This endeavor is quite atypical. Not stakeholders out of their respective silos were talking to politicians, but it was a dialogue amongst stakeholders that was at the heart of the process. And this is rather an unusual procedure, not only policy advice from specialized experts committed to a certain neutrality, for example, academic or scientific policy advice, but a negotiation process between the representatives of mostly conflicting social and economic interests in the pre-political field, so to say. And the political capital that lies therein is less based on the fact that we would say something revolutionary new. Rather, it is based on the fact that these very stakeholders have jointly agreed on a conceptual consensus that is shared by everyone. From this perspective, I would say our endeavor has led to a twofold result. On the one hand, we have developed a conceptual consensus that opens up concrete steps for the further development of the European agri-food systems towards greater economic profitability, more environmental sustainability and social responsibility. More on that later. On the other hand, the strategic dialogue on the future of agriculture has taken stock of a key area of EU life and economy through a new format of political discourse. Prerequisite of this were confidentiality, which I already in this room called a legitimate form of non-transparency, confidentiality, and above all, mutual trust. The latter originating essentially from the ability and willingness of all the members to recognize that also counter positions can be based on reasonable grounds, that none of the individual positions represented is completely free of contradictions or can promise a solution to all problems on its own. These two results, the final report and this new culture of communication, if I may say so, these two results are not the same, but they are connected. And I would be delighted, Madam President, if both of these results of our work were helpful for the European Commission and your presidency. Thank you. Now, this is it.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
President, yeah, voila.
Voila, thank you. Thank you very much. I think, yes, congratulations also to all those who contributed to it.
Merci.
Here in the room, merci beaucoup. Strategic dialogue on the future of the agriculture. Lots of good work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The President will take a few questions before we move on to the detailed presentation by Professor Strohschneider. Angelo, Please present the media you work for.
Angelo Di Mambro at Euractiv. The European Commission reduced the environmental obligation for farmers following the protests in early 2024. Will this approach continue in the next mandate?
So the strategic dialogue on the future of Europe is very clear and matching with our ambitions. From the very first time I visited the dialogue, it was impressive and encouraging for me to see that all stakeholders said very clearly we stick to the climate goals. What we have to debate is the best way to get there. And this is, I think, the basic attitude that all the stakeholders had, and that in the very end forged this progress. What we've done in spring is that we have already started a new approach that is more trust in the farmers and less micromanagement, but better incentives. Basically, we have said that those who have less than 10 hectares will not be micro-controlled and not be asked to send in, for example, pictures all the time of what they are doing in the fields. But we trust them initially that they will fulfill their obligation. Less than 10 hectares was something that was relevant for 65% of the farmers. So the vast majority of the farmers have small farms. But it only was relevant for 10% of the European farming land. And therefore, the big farmers with the big areas, reasonable controls have to be. But what we did is, for small farmers, less micromanagement, more trust, and better incentives. And this is also the case here. I want the system to change, that the right techniques and the right behavior towards working with nature and protecting nature are remunerated. So this must be a principle, that you're not getting always penalized and controlled for stuff you're doing, but that the right incentives make the farmers the best ambassadors of protecting nature.
Simon, please present your media.
Simon Klatt, Agua Europe from Germany. I have a question for the President. Frau von der Leyen, the SD report recommends that its consensus-based approach be kept on in the future. What do you expect this will look like concretely? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the recommendation is very interesting because this group has really grown together and built this consensus that, of course, they are representatives of their institutions or groups. So it's a very broad consensus that has been built. And for the Commission, it will be extremely valuable to have such a kind of advisory board, perhaps could I call it that way, accompanying the rollout or the development of this report and making sure that it turns into reality and that it is rolled out on the ground. Of course, we know that the devil is always in the detail, but there too, it is good to have all the expertise that now this group has, to have them to give advice, and of course to accompany with us the development of the vision for the future of agriculture.
Marek.
Hello, Marek Majewski, German press agency DPA. I will switch to German, if I may. Frau Präsidentin, es ist 2024 und trotzdem sieht es so aus, als ob es einen großen Gender Gap in der kommenden EU-Kommission gibt. Was sagen Sie dazu, dass so viele Staats- und Regierungschefs Ihre Bitte ignoriert haben, eine Frau und einen Mann für einen Kommissars- oder eine Kommissarinsposten vorzuschlagen? Und sehen Sie noch Chancen, dass es ein ausgeglichenes Verhältnis in der nächsten EU-Kommission geben wird? Und wenn ja, wie? Vielen Dank.
But I'll answer in English. So, what are the criteria I'm looking at in the composition of the College of the Commission? The first criteria is competence. We live in troubled times. We have a heavy responsibility to lead the European Union through uncharted waters. So the Commission needs competence. And competence means high-ranking political experience, executive experience, for example, former prime ministers or former ministers or deputy ministers, or at least senior diplomatic experience, or high-ranking work in the European institution. This is crucial and the first and most important criterion, competence. Then there's a second criterion, this is balance. You all know it. We're very clear on the geographic balance, north, south, east, west, and the balance of the portfolios in the different regions. We are very clear on the balance of political affiliation. So we should also be balanced what diversity is concerned, kind of representing, well, the European Union, the people of the European Union, and half of the people of the European Union are women. So I have, throughout my whole political life, been fighting for women having access to decision-making position and leading position. And my experience is that if you don't ask for it, you don't get it. It does not come naturally. And this is why I sent my letter. Because if I would not have sent this letter, there would not have been a hook also to look at the diversity topic. And it's a tough journey, without any question, but that does not at all change my conviction and my determination. If I would not have sent this letter, what would have been the fact or the case? The initial proposals, if you look at the names you all know, besides the High Representative and me, the President, for the 25 member states that then nominate, would have been 4 women and 21 men. So without that letter and without that discussion, this would be the next college. And therefore, it is absolutely worth it. The process is ongoing. By now, we are at 2-digit women, but I haven't seen all potential candidates. I have, with all the heads of state and governments, discussions on the different names, on the different possibilities. And of course, I acknowledge that sometimes for the heads of state and government, it's difficult, for example, if there is a committee and then a parliamentary process that has already taken place. This is not easy. Sometimes the man is better qualified than the woman. Sometimes we also have the other way around. And I also had the situation that the evening before nomination, the woman that was qualified and would have been nominated canceled and did not want to take the job. So you have all the different elements that one knows in life. But what is for me important that is that we really seriously address this topic. All 3 in the treaty, all 3 institutions are responsible for forming the college. It is the responsibility of the member states, and I think competence and balance are 2 criteria really to take serious. Of course, it's the responsibility also what competence and portfolios are concerned of the President of the European Commission. And of course, there is a responsibility of the European Parliament.
Virginie.
Oui, bonjour, Virginie Malingue, Le Monde. Pour revenir sur l'agriculture, vous avez dit, dans les 3 critères que vous avez énumérés pour la vision que vous nous livrerez dans les 100 prochains jours du prochain mandat, vous avez beaucoup insisté sur la notion de récompenser les bonnes pratiques des agriculteurs. Est-ce que ça signifie que pour l'avenir, vous n'envisagez plus de réglementation contraignante en matière de lutte contre le réchauffement climatique et uniquement une réglementation à base d'incitations financières et autres pour inciter les agriculteurs à être plus vertueux en termes d'environnement?
So first of all, very important is that the criteria I mentioned at the beginning this is not complete at all, because this strategic dialogue has a lot more in it. I was just referring to what we have started to do already. And of course, do not harm is an important principle and stays an important principle. But what we have to do is that we incentivize farmers, because they know much better what to do and how to do it positively if the incentives are there and the remuneration for the beneficial behavior to protecting nature and choose the right approach is there. Of course, there are many other criteria that play a role. You need modern techniques. You need a different approach in the remuneration, for example. That is very important. So farmers tell me, and this is why they also are very clear that they want to stick to the climate goals, and that for them it's important to have a sustainable agriculture because they know it's their own livelihood that is at stake. But we can get much better. Do no harm is one principle, but incentivize, remunerate and give positive encouragement to the right behavior. There is a lot of good substance and much more than that in this strategic dialogue report.
Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of the first part of the press conference. We will now continue with the detailed presentation by Professor Strohschneider. Thank you so much.